Little Big is a 1981 World Fantasy Award winning novel by John Crowley. I actually listened to an audiobook version read by John Crowley, which is apparently from a revised kind of 25th or something like that anniversary text, even though that text actually has not been apparently published, but you can hear it on audio, which is how I did. Um, this is very much the fairies at the end of the garden kind of a novel. George MacDonald gets referenced in here. I think of Lewis Carroll. I think of very much kind of that kind of a 19th century late 19th century, early 20th century kind of conception of the fairy folk, of not necessarily positive, happy fairy folk, but just really mysterious alien fairy folk that it's with magic that violates all kind of reason, all kind of physics. John Drinkwater, who is at the kind of the beginning of this book, comes upon Violet and her father, and it's the Philosophical Society, and they're talking about how it's bigger on the inside, and then it's bigger and bigger until you're at the very center of this magical area where it's basically vast vistas where heroes ride forever through fairyland. And what this turns into is very much a family saga of the Drinkwaters. Violet marries John. There's she's maybe already pregnant. They have daughters. Most notably, Alice Daly Drinkwater, becomes Daily Alice. And the story opens with her intended, Smoky Bramble, kind of walking to the family estate, the Edgewater, which John Drinkwater, who is an architect, whose kind of bizarre, weird ideas get kind of he retires to the country and just does and writes stories and does illustrations, but he does make this one house, this Edgewater house, which is like multi-sided. It's got a different house on each side of it. So from depending on where you approach it, it looks like a completely different house. And indeed, this house seems to be the locus, the door into sort of fairyland. And there's very much a thing of Smokey is told at the beginning of the book that he has to walk there. That's from the city, and that's one of the conditions that they've been given by a talking fish, which seems to be maybe a representation of these fairy folk. It's one of these books where it's not it's when I say it's like kind of that 19th century kind of fairy thing, it's not your Tolkien, not even sort of your Tolkien-esque kind of, or Conan, fantasies with wizards with swords or stuff like this. This is very odd, like we're in the real world, but just off to the side, there's very kind of subtle magic going along. It kind of builds as it goes along later, but at the beginning, you might be forgiven for saying, like, oh, this doesn't seem very fantasy-ish to me, but it does as it goes along. And all through this book, it is also buoyed by Crowley's kind of lovely, elusive, dense language. He is writing definitely in a kind of a high literary tone. In some ways, it's a book that there's such a gush of stuff. I tried to read this a couple of times before, this in the actual book thing, and I kind of bounced off it all those times. And finally, it's like, I found it as an audiobook at my local library, and it was like, okay, I'll try it this way, and I just sort of let the language flow over me, because I'm a kind of plodding reader, and I have like I think what hung me up before is I kept on stopping and trying to understand what's going on here, which is sort of the wrong way to try and get into a big dreamlike magical book like this. This is one of these books where you just you jump in the deep end and you sink and you drown happily. I think is how I would put it. And but that to say that the things that I kind of hung on to were a lot of the very kind of human relationships in this book of lost wives, of lost fathers, of just the hardness of making connections. There's a section um, later in the book where Smokey is, who's now an old man, is kind of interacting with his son Oberon, and Smokey looked up at his tall son. Through the whole of their lives together, it had been as though he and Oberon had been back to back, fixed that way and unable to turn. They had had to communicate by indirections through others, or by craning their necks and talking out of the sides of their mouths. They had to guess at each other's faces and actions. Now and then one or the other would try a quick spin around to catch the other unawares, but it never worked quite, the other still behind and facing away, as in the old vaudeville act. And the effort of communication in that posture, the effort of making oneself clear, had often grown too much for them, and they'd given it up mostly. But now, maybe because of what had happened to him in the city, whatever that was, or maybe only the increase of time wearing away the bond that had both held them and held them apart, Oberon had turned around. Slowly I turn, and all that was left then was for Smoky himself to turn and face him. Well, he said, believe. I don't know. Believe. That's a word. And it's like that kind of like thing of a father and a son not being able to see each other. That's I think that's a really good example of what this book can bring. Of there was a lot of the book I was like, oh, am I lost? Am I gonna? I don't know what's quite going on or what the symbology means. But somehow at the end of this book, it starts to kind of coalesce together. And this is also called the Fairies' Parliament. And that Fairies' Parliament at the end is both a wake and a wedding. So there's a mourning, but there's also a union. And I felt that. And that was like, it's one of these books that I think I'm actually going to be eager to actually go back to and find more richness in, find more meaning. It's a book that's filled with our culture. It's interspersed with all these kind of little quotes from various people, various authors throughout history. Stuff like the very start of one. Men are men, but man is a woman. Chesterton. Or here near the end. This is from by Samuel Johnson on Cymbeline. To remark the folly of the fiction, the absurdity of the conduct, the confusion of the names and manners of different times, and the impossibility of the events in any system of life, were to waste criticism upon unresisting imbecility, upon faults too evident for detection and too gross for aggravation. So it's a book that wears its learning on its sleeve. It's a book that challenges you, that is not afraid to leave you floundering. There's a lot of it's one of these things of like, there's a lot of the characters in the book just don't know what the hell's going on, and it's sort of like you are inducted into the family as well, this Drinkwater family, and are kind of at sea. I mean, I think maybe if I have a criticism, I sometimes feel like maybe some of the women are used as kind of symbols of nobility, which I guess, coming from a male author, that's as a male, you look at female and you think, huh? Whereas I'm sure women or others look at each other, and it's like, but it is also one of these books where everybody is that separate. Everyone is facing back to back, and you're trying to turn to see, but you can't. And also just at the beautiful, I'll just leave you with the final images of this book is of decay, of all the lights going out, and it felt like it's the lights going out on a universe, and that could be our universe. That kind of beautiful kind of how all of us, our world, all of this civilization, our existence of human beings in general is just, we are a blip in time, and when we're gone, everything will grow over, and the lights will go out, and yeah, yeah. So, John Crowley, Little Big, a challenge, and something you have to jump into with both feet and drown. Please, just drown and enjoy. Okay, more videos later.